The river. Most of us hardly give it a thought as we go through each day. When we do think about the river, it's usually in terms of recreation or the good old days of the steamboats. These are certainly important parts of the Ohio River story, but those two subjects amount only to a few lines in that story. Many of us who live and work on its banks are unaware that today the Ohio River is a lifeline to Mid-America. It's the conduit that carries much of the raw material used to produce the goods and services consumed by people throughout the country. The river also supplies us with one of our most crucial elements, water. Water in sufficient quantities to drink and to supply the needs of cities, industries, and farms. The Ohio River is far too important to be given just a passing thought. So join us for the next few minutes as we take a closer look at our quiet resource. The appearance of the steamboat brought the river to what many feel was the high point of its importance. These boats provided a somewhat regular and relatively inexpensive way for the people in surrounding communities to market their goods in other areas of the country, even in other countries. During the 1880s, this part of the Ohio Valley became the greatest hardwood lumber market in the world. The area experienced rapid growth, with Evansville more than quadrupling its population between 1860 and 1890. Though the river remained important at the turn of the century, it ceased to be the hub of people's lives. Improved roads and expanded rail service gave people mobility that previously they had only dreamed of. It was during this time that many people changed their view of the river, no longer seeing it as a benefactor, but rather as an unpredictable neighbor. Certainly, those area residents who had to contend with the floods of 1913 and 1937 had to wonder if living so close to the river held any possible advantage. However, both government and industry anticipated the inland waterway's future importance and worked to ensure that commerce on the river would depend less on nature's whims and more on man's ingenuity. The installation of locks and dams on the Ohio, started in 1909 and completed 20 years later, serves as testimony to their vision and commitment. The outbreak of World War II unquestionably demonstrated the key role of the inland waterway system to America's success. Towboats and barges operating in our protected inland channels delivered large quantities of strategic materials, goods, and supplies. The inland waterways industry made another strong contribution in the areas of shipbuilding and repair. Locally, the Evansville shipyard played a major role in the war effort. At full production, it employed nearly 20,000 and was delivering 2 LSTs per week. During the war, many companies recognized the value of locating on or near a river. From 1950 to 1970, nearly $37 billion were invested in major plant construction and expansion along the Ohio. Chemical companies spent over $3.5 billion, and shipments of chemicals and chemical products on the river jumped from 1 million tons to 10.6 million tons per year during this same time period. Another illustration is offered by the aluminum industry. From 1957 to 1971, 30% of all new aluminum reduction capacity in the United States was constructed on the Ohio River. Although aluminum ore and concentrates came to these plants by barge, the river was not the primary factor in the choice of location. Low-cost electricity was the key. Over 60% of all coal consumed by electric generating stations in the Ohio Valley is received by water. Water-based industries such as metals, plastics, chemicals, aggregates, and electric power are extremely dependent upon water transportation. The presence of these plants tends to provide fertile ground for a number of satellite industries, which often challenge the water shipping industries in scale. Water transportation may not have been the direct reason for the satellite location, but it has been a factor. Frequently, plants are located beside a river, not for the water transportation, but for the water competition The presence of the river ensures competitive rates from rail and truck lines in the area. Without the river, there would be no competition between carriers and no plants. The modernization of equipment has played a major role in waterborne transport success. The stern-wheel steamboat, the pride of its day, did well to carry 1,000 tons of cargo. The boat and its crew of 20 were immobilized by fog, at nightfall, tied up during high water and swift currents, and either lightly loaded or totally idle during low water.
A modern tow carries up to 50,000 tons with a crew of 12 or less, and it is in constant movement upstream or downstream in all kinds of weather 24 hours a day. As with most equipment-dominated industries, modernization comes at a high cost. A typical towboat operating on the Ohio River costs between $5 and $10 million and will incur $2,000 to $3,000 per hour in operating expenses. Barges, depending on their type, require an investment of around $600,000 each. Despite this large outlay of capital, barges and towboats deliver their cargoes at significantly less expense than other modes of transportation. Though substantial increases in productivity have been achieved with new equipment and improved parts design, the weakest link in the inland waterway system are the locks. Many of the Ohio River locks have been improved, but the overall process is fragmentary. Unless a systematic approach is used to finish the renovation and building of locking facilities, further gains in productivity will be seriously compromised. Because it is such a quiet asset and it moves at a leisurely pace, it's difficult to believe the inland waterway system is the dominant sector in waterborne commerce. Yet it carries twice the volume of coastal vessels and 3 times the tonnage of Great Lakes. In addition, it is much more diversified than either of the other two, both in the variety of commodities carried and in the number of port areas and industries served. During 2011, our stretch of the river handled 138 million tons of coal, 13 million tons of petroleum, over 13 million tons of farm and food goods, 16 million tons of chemicals, 39 million tons of crude material, and 7 million tons of manufactured goods. A total of 230 million tons transported. All of this, plus fulfilling the other needs of cities, industries, and over 8,000 recreational boaters in our area. Besides moving these tremendous tonnages, waterfront industries invest large amounts of capital to create permanent jobs, payrolls, and tax bases. And Uniontown has an economic impact on this area of over $1 billion per year in wages and salaries. The inland waterway system is successful for a number of reasons. Water transportation is quiet, safe, fuel efficient, and cost effective. A 15-barge tow typical on the Ohio River moves as much material as 225 railroad cars or 870 large semi-trailer trucks. Over 220 barges a day pass quietly through our section of the Ohio River. It would take nearly 12,000 large trucks or 3,000 rail cars to move the same tonnage. Just think of the impact that additional traffic would have on our communities and infrastructure. As the cost of other modes of transportation increase, an inability to keep up with demand is projected over the next 20 years. Yet, waterborne transportation is prepared to meet the challenge. By the year 2025, inland waterways are anticipated to carry over 23% of all the ton miles of freight haulage in this country at a little more than 3.5% of the freight carrying investment. Waterborne carriers continue to move the biggest tonnage, the longest distance, and with the least commitment of capital. To the people and the businesses who use the Ohio River, it is more than merely a quiet resource. It is their livelihood, and they have always maintained a deep commitment and full support of the environment. Protecting the waterways so they will be clean and preserved for generations to come is our goal. Additionally, we strictly adhere to legislation that governs the interaction between the river operator and the environment. As you can see, the importance of the river didn't end with the passage of the steamboat era. In many ways, we depend on it more today than ever before. Our quiet resource may be easy to overlook, but its value to our country, to our communities, and to each of us cannot be ignored. The Ohio River, a vital resource today and tomorrow.